Okay, good afternoon. Firstly, thank you to the Australian Naval Institute. We've only recently joined the Institute and so far it's been a great experience listening to Kim Beazley speak on the future of Australian and US integration. I think speaks significantly to a lot of the focus we have here today in terms of how we move forward in working with our coalition partners. I personally think it's quite an exciting time to be involved with defence and defence industry because we're at a stage where there is a genuine revitalisation of defence capability and also the kick-off of a wide array of initiatives to improve our joint force effectiveness. I don't think there's any surprise for most that over the years there hasn't been a strong focus in the joint, and there's been very much a platform focus as identified in the Defence White Paper. From my perspective, defence industry need to form closer ties with this, and joint mission planning is an example where defence industry can achieve better outcomes by providing a more strategic and coherent approach to the capability. When I look at the PR presentations earlier today, it's probably no surprise that on the front of your various newspapers you see pictures of LHDs, Seahawk Romeo and so on. You very rarely see someone sitting at a computer terminal looking at ones and zeros and so on, because it's an enabling technology that sits in behind everything that doesn't sell newspapers. What it does, however, do is help to maximise the effect you can achieve out of your force that you have available to you. We've also seen, even in that presentation just then about P8, that the complexity of the systems that we're getting are increasing significantly. It's not just P8, it's all of the naval ships coming into service. Everything is getting much more complex, and we need to look at ways to simplify the information that we're receiving from these capabilities to process it and distribute it. In some regards, we're at a stage where we're having information saturation, and we need to look at the command and control systems and how to get the best out of them to condense down that information to usable information that we can make effective decisions on. With all of these systems, just as we've seen with LHD and P8, you don't introduce something and have it as a viable, great capability straight away. It takes time to implement new technology, and typically for any new capability you bring in, you should expect 5 to 7 years to train your workforce, to learn the business process, to refine doctrine and so on, so that you actually achieve a solid, robust capability. I often use the word magic when we talk about joint mission planning, because people seem to think that here it is, there's the magic, but the systems require information, they require training, and they require time for people to learn how to get the best out of the systems. For me, I actually see amphibious operations as a magnificent catalyst for joint mission planning, because we're going to be in an environment where we have Army, Air Force and Navy working closely together, and they genuinely need to work closely and share information to maximise the military effect. So for us, the amphibious capability is a great way to get the focus where it needs to be. So just briefly about us, we are an Australian SME, strategic industry partner with Defence, who look at tailoring what we receive in Australia to the ADF's unique operational environments. The key thing here is, achieving military effects safely with the best available information. And this is an area very passionate to me, because I think historically we've settled for disconnection of the tactical elements because it was too hard to get information to them, or they just made do with the best they had at the point in time. So the type of stuff that we do is providing project management, engineering, software development to integrate these systems, providing training. So the image there is for an armed reconnaissance helicopter. We're currently rewriting all the software for MRH and ARH, so we can actually integrate those systems into the primary mission planning environments in defence, so the Joint Mission Planning System. And they're a good example of an acquisition process where the focus was the platforms and not so much the complementary systems needed to realise their full potential. They provided complementary systems that didn't talk to anything else in the environment, and now that they're trying to transition from acquisition to sustainment, there's now finally a correction to say, how can we do that now so we have a sustainable, enduring capability? The Defence White Paper this year has been a great help in pointing out a lot of stuff for a lot of people. I think there's something in the Defence White Paper for everyone. There's new capabilities, there's new tools, and there's acknowledgement from my perspective that there is a need to improve how we look at the enabling and integrating systems. And you'll already see across Defence and across CASG significant movements. All three services are moving to improve how we integrate between the three services. And Plan Jericho has been mentioned numerous times today. There are similar initiatives in Army and Navy to improve integration. So when I look at this and put this into that joint mission planning context, the key takeaways from me are that we need to connect to an information environment that has the capability to share the necessary information both domestically and internationally. So we need the connectivity to our coalition partners, we need compatible information, compatible data, and we need to make it available and be able to communicate it effectively. You know, also, we need to be able to develop a sustainable local industry to deliver an enduring integration capability. It's unfortunate that we routinely buy a capability and the only consideration afforded to the complementary systems is we're getting that capability, and that's just the stuff that came with it. We need to integrate it effectively into our environment. If you look at Navy's plans to establish a continuous shipbuilding capability in Australia, that also comes with a continuous need to have the complementary industries there with it. So that requires strategic planning for how the complementary systems such as mission planning are integrated across platforms to receive that joint effect. The Defence White Paper's words about a more capable, agile and potent force are all about how can we better use integration of these systems to achieve that agile and potent future force. So this is quite similar to one of the previous slides talking about your strategic, operational and tactical elements. And definitely if we look at this in the context of how we've operated for literally 100 years, we quite often, set those boundaries between strategic, operational and tactical. But when we look at command and control and we look at the information environments that we live in, the environment that we're in is changing. We have more information. Looking at the technologies available to us and how we work, we need to continually look at this and determine what does that mean for us. There were questions earlier about workforce planning. I have children in school and they talk to STEM, science, technology programs and how the children of today are being trained for jobs that don't exist yet. Our workforce of people who are out there doing this stuff day to day are in a position where how they're currently operating may not be effective in the future. The national and military ends that we're after from a strategic perspective will change. And if I take the example of guided weapons and precision munitions, at the moment, to have a precision effect on a location requires precision information. You have to design the effect that you're after, and to do that, you need to consider collateral damage. Ultimately, you might want a particular effect on a building which has an orphanage on one side, a school on the other, and a hospital behind it. So you need to look at collateral damage effects, you need to look at rules of engagement, you need to look at legal review, and so on. And all of this will routinely happen at the strategic level, something that might, for example, occur in headquarters JOC. When that information is passed to the tactical organisation to execute, their ability to change that data may not exist anymore. To look at what has been designed and the effect that they're after, we're moving beyond the stage where the operational unit or the tactical units are allowed to influence change in that design without then pushing their weapons solutions back to the strategic level for additional review. So we need to look at what effect that has in terms of fundamental inputs to capability and how we need to change our workforce with these systems going forward. So these are some fairly basic principles that I like to look at in terms of there's nothing really new here. We shouldn't have air gaps within an environment. If we have an information environment with the best available information, then we shouldn't expect that someone with a helicopter on the back of a ship has a standalone laptop disconnected from the world that they plan on. They should have full connectivity to the information they need to effectively plan and execute their missions. Common software, common hardware, common information. We get the best effect across defence if we can actually have a strategic approach to how we do these things, not buying a capability and just getting whatever comes with it. Again, with small children, the childcare used to say, you get what you get, you don't get upset. We can think about these systems more and labour requirements on the people delivering capability, including foreign military sales, to drive systems and solutions that we can integrate effectively to achieve that joint effect. I talk about information ready for execution, not for PowerPoint. Trying to get the strategic organisations away from Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, and have effective processing of information so that the information we're providing to the tactical units is ready for execution, not just for them to then go and do an entire new processing of that information. Training. For those who have been on any major exercise, it's routine that the first week, especially of a command post exercise in the command and control environment, is spent learning how to use the tools. So you essentially are wasting the first 4 to 5 days of any military activity learning your feet before you actually start exercising. And lastly, common data standards. We want to be able to communicate freely and effectively between naval, air and land capabilities, as well as foreign forces, the US and the like. That requires common data standards to be able to achieve that. And we are working towards that to try and get the best ways to communicate. During execution, this can be fairly easy. Link 11, Link 16 are fairly straightforward these days, and we can do that during the execution phase. But we need to consider that we have to plan and replan and change in a dynamic world, so therefore we need the ability to share, communicate and adapt as we work through our planning. The other thing to consider in this environment that we work in is that the environment is changing. Security within our environment is increasing. We need to be able to share information in a secure environment and also protect from cyber threats. And we also need to look at the information assurance aspects in terms of the national issues of getting something wrong. I don't have any of the background of the recent events in Syria where munitions were dropped in the wrong location, but that has an immediate national impact if the result of that is poor information that could have been corrected. So, culture is a major issue in terms of how we change. We need to change culture to be able to improve how we do business. So desire for me is an important thing in that we should be fighting to be connected with our capabilities. Australians are very good at getting the job done and doing the best they can with what they have provided to them. Unfortunately, that means that, between operators and engineers, operators will often accept when engineers don't connect them to the information environment. And that leads me to the topic of worthiness. I have a very healthy aircraft background, and the challenge I've always found is that when I put the word air in front of airworthiness, I suffer the wrath of fellow engineers. Everything gets really hard really quickly because engineers love to suddenly implement configuration control, and they will often implement technologies and solutions at the expense of information and operational considerations. So I often talk to the worthiness of systems as opposed to airworthiness, seaworthiness or so on, because it's typically more important to have access to the information than it is to have a locked-down computer doing mission planning that I have to manually key information into or move compact disks back and forth to. So worthiness as opposed from airworthiness, technical worthiness, seaworthiness, we often need to have the operational aspects and considerations take priority over historic ways of thinking about configuration control. Thank you. Security is also an issue. Security is growing. ITAR, security, compartmentalisation, all these things are barriers to sharing information and working collaboratively together. We need to find a better way to do this so that we can actually be more joint in how we operate. So looking at where this actually goes wrong in terms of our capability and our transition, in part looking at how we acquire and then sustain, the current shifts in CASG are great positives. I'm a glasses half full type of person. Moving from an environment where you had acquisition organisations transitioning to sustainment, which could often be a hostile activity, to an organisational paradigm where we should be able to get the best appropriate organisations taking responsibility and accountability for the systems that they're going to introduce and sustain as an enduring capability. The projects in this area generally aren't to blame. There hasn't been strategic guidance on how this is to happen. There hasn't been roadmaps of how they should plug into the enterprise, and we need to get better, both defence and industry, at helping to plan a way forward that allows capability to join the enterprise and to share and collaborate as a joint force. I think historically, most people remember, and the words haven't been spoken in quite a while, where defence got on the bandwagon and everything was all about network-centric warfare. There was lots of talk and lots of consideration about NCW, and then it quietly just kind of went away. Hopefully this time, with the support from government, the restructures within defence and CASG, there is a real appetite to achieve proper joint planning. The Smart Buyer Framework. The first principal review is one of the key things driving this change within CASG and will hopefully provide the impetus to improve how support systems such as mission planning systems are introduced with a strategic view across defence. Introduction of integrated project planning, including more consideration of fundamental inputs to capability and delivering improved capability outcomes sooner. So doing stuff faster, and from a jointness perspective, also considering the information and the data needed to make informed decisions and help the guys out doing this stuff for real have the best information to achieve their military effects. And the key to that is making the appropriate organisations responsible and accountable for the capability realisation of the systems that they are the experts in. You know, we essentially operate as the equivalent to a system program office for mission planning. Asking an aircraft SPO or a maritime ship SPO to take responsibility for a system that is not their skill set doesn't make sense. So the simple question I always ask is which organisations are best placed to acquire and sustain specific capabilities? Where does that expertise live? And from a maritime perspective, that might be within FISO and so on, to achieve that effect for the combat systems and have a central approach for the combat systems for all naval vessels. You know, and the problem with getting it wrong is that that wrong focus will ultimately end up in isolation of systems rather than integrating them. So, finishing up, we've probably talked to this quite a lot already. Obviously, this is a very common picture. We will have a requirement to have operational interfaces with P8s, all of these assets, and this is the joint environment which is not quite here yet, but it's going to be here very shortly. All forces are dependent on one another, and to achieve that joint effect, we need to have an effective joint mission planning capability. And that includes everything from electronic warfare data, restricted frequency lists, weather, and so on. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Tim. So do you think from an industry's perspective you need some guru in defence who's going to try and bring this together, or there should be some overall standards about joint mission planning? How do you think industry can engage into defence?
So historically for these mission systems, from an air perspective, Air Force has taken the lead, and you have Air Command would do air mission planning from now out to 3 to 5 years, and Air Force Headquarters takes the lead for the longer term planning. Under the revised frameworks within Defence, VCDF's office has been put front and centre to take charge of these systems. The challenge at the moment is that VCDF's office is still spinning up to be able to take carriage of that.
Other questions for Tim? No, in that case, sir, we'll go directly to your... Thank you very much indeed, Tim. Very kind of you.